The HistoryNetwork.org podcast, season 17, episode 10, Hobart's Funnies. Last time we looked at the man Hobart himself, and this time round we are looking at the strange vehicles that were developed by him, known as Hobart's Funnies. In March of 1943, the 79th Armoured Division was due to be disbanded. A manpower shortage called for the bulk of the force to be redeployed to make up shortfalls in other units, but the disastrous raid on Dieppe the previous year had proved that any invasion of mainland Europe would need to be supported by armour, and this would need to be modified for an amphibious assault. So it was that Alan Brooke, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, had his happy brainwave and asked Major General Percy Hobart if he would oversee the conversion of the unit to a specialised armoured unit, concentrating on developing vehicles that could overcome the German defences. The strange vehicles that were developed and operated became known as Hobart's Funnies. The raid on Dieppe in August 1942 was to be a raid in force with limited objectives. Some 6,000 troops would assault the beach, hold the port for a short period before withdrawing after intelligence gathering. As it was, they hardly got off the beach. The plan had called for 30 Churchill tanks to be landed in support of the troops. As it was, 27 made it ashore, only 15 made it over the sea wall, and they were stopped by roadblocks that the engineers failed to clear. None of the tanks returned to England. The fiasco proved a number of things. The selection of any landing beach would be key. Many of the tanks failed to get off the beach due to the shingle and steep incline, resulting in many of the AFVs floundering. Obstacles that needed to be overcome proved to be too dangerous for the engineers to clear them under fire. Analysing the failures of Dieppe, von Rundstedt, the commander of the German army in the West, noted, "Just as we are going to evaluate these experiences for the future, so is the assaulting force, perhaps even more so, as it has gained the experience dearly. He will not do it like this a second time." In the aftermath of the Dieppe raid, the Department of Tank Design published a report. They believed armour had a role with the lead elements of any amphibious assault. They were convinced it was possible to develop means by which tanks could overcome obstacles or destroy them without the need for the crews to expose themselves to enemy fire. In further meetings, engineering assault tanks were considered that could perform a number of tasks, such as mine clearance, mine laying, and the destruction of anti-tank obstacles. The idea of the Specialised tank was hardly new. Designed to break the deadlock of no man's land during the First World War, from the outset mine clearance had been considered. Others had been stripped and used as movable causeways, crossing the Canal du Nord in 1918. As well as troop-carrying tanks, a floating tank had been demonstrated on the Hendon Reservoir as the war closed. Though development of specialised tanks had all but stopped in the interwar years, necessity of war had seen renewed interest and spasmodic development. The need to clear paths through the vast minefields deployed in the desert caused South African Captain Abraham Dutoit to conceive the idea of the flail tank. Early unofficial trials in the desert proved successful, and modified Matilda tanks were fitted with flails. The idea being a rotating drum was slung in front of the tank, fitted with chains. It rotated with the chains beating the ground, setting off mines. Another of the iconic Funnies was also already a prototype, the DD tank. The Hungarian engineer Nicholas Straussler had settled in Britain before the outbreak of war. Whilst working for Vickers Armstrong, he developed collapsible floats that could keep a tank buoyant. This consisted of a canvas screen which was raised by rubber air pillars and held in place with struts. The duplex drive, DD, was a standard tank fitted with the flotation screen. Its exhaust extended to prevent the engine flooding, and a propeller was fitted. After a lot of trial and error, when fitted to the Sherman, the DD could manage around 6 miles an hour. So it was that Hobart, within weeks of accepting his new role, could conduct his first demonstrations for the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. The beach landings were going to be a challenge. The 1st Assault Brigade historian writes, "Apart from heavily reinforced concrete pillboxes, many other obstacles, natural and artificial, had to be overcome. The breaching teams had to be prepared to deal with the high sea walls, impassable to tanks, steel obstructions set in the beaches and often booby-trapped, streams and anti-tank ditches, barbed wire, roadblocks, and by no means least, ubiquitous mines. All these things would be covered by intense enemy fire, carefully sighted from concrete defences. There would be no question of withdrawal or failure once the tanks were ashore." Scattered across Britain, Hobart's men put their machines through their paces. Churchill tanks were on the whole converted. The Shermans coming in from the US were mainly sent to other armoured units. The Crocodile was a converted Churchill. The machine gun was replaced with a flamethrower. Behind it was towed a 9-ton armoured trailer carrying fuel. A jet of napalm could be fired over 100 metres. The Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineer, AVRE, was again based on the Churchill. Performing a number of roles, its main gun had been replaced with a 290mm petard spigot mortar, firing a 40-pound bomb known as the Flying Dustbin. At a range of about 140 metres, it was capable of destroying concrete bunkers, pillboxes, and large obstacles in the road. Unfortunately, the spigot mortar had to be reloaded from outside the vehicle. From its hatches, engineers could deploy a number of other optional additions. Fascines, rolled up bunches of sticks to fill trenches and ditches to allow tanks to cross. Bobbins, a reel of canvas with poles that could be laid over soft ground to allow itself, other vehicles and soldiers to cross. Small box girders, 30-foot, 9.1 metres girders that could be deployed across gaps such as blown bridges in 30 seconds to allow crossing, and the bull's horn plough, a forward-facing plough to dig the earth and detonate any mines. To overcome high walls, the Ark was a Churchill with its turret removed and a folding ramp added. It would be driven into a gap, deploy its ramps, and other vehicles simply drive over the top of it. The original Arks were designed to enable other tanks to climb sea walls on the beach defences on D-Day, although it is not certain if any were actually used. The Carrot, Double Onion and VEB, Vehicle Emplaced Bangalore, could be deployed to destroy barbed wire. The SBG assault bridge was introduced specifically for D-Day. Fitted to an AVRE, it carried a 30-foot bridge. Once the bridge was lowered into position, it would be detached and the AVRE could be put to other use. On January the 27th and February the 11th, 1944, Supreme Commander General Dwight Eisenhower and First Army Commander Lieutenant General Omar Bradley observed demonstrations by Hobart's Funnies. Eisenhower was so impressed that he recommended Bradley include 79th Armoured Division teams with the first wave. Uniquely, Hobart organised his division to make it capable of conducting support operations as detached units within the administrative structure of other divisions. The 79th was the only division in World War II to never have fought as a self-contained unit. On D-Day itself, only the DD tanks were used by the Americans, but subsequently formations of the 79th were routinely deployed with the US Army. Not all the Funnies were successful. The Canal Defence Light, CDL, was a powerful searchlight. It was intended to blind defenders during a night attack. The name was intended to conceal the CDL's true purpose. The lights could be set to flicker to help disorientate the defenders. In practice, it was the operators who reported headaches when the lights flickered. The real drawback was that attacking troops were silhouetted, giving the defenders easy targets. The CDLs were rarely deployed, and even then usually for illumination rather than the war-winning weapon intended. When the invasion of Europe finally came on the 6th of June 1944, the 79th excelled itself with numerous awards for gallantry. The Crabs were usually first off the large landing craft. Lieutenant V. Bowles' military medal citation reads, Lieutenant V. Bowl led the outer breaching team, which, though losing one flail to an anti-tank gun and finding it difficult in bringing up its AVREs, successfully beat out its lane and its lateral under heavy harassing fire by snipers. The attack was held up by heavy anti-tank and small arms fire. All the tanks in this sector, except Bowles, had been knocked out, and the infantry were pinned down by small arms fire. Lieutenant Bowl attacked and destroyed two 88mm guns single-handedly and cleared a lane through the minefield in spite of the fact that his tank had been badly hit and was only just able to move. Later in the day he repaired his tank under heavy mortar and small arms fire and continued to render assistance to the attacking infantry. A Lance Sergeant Scaife was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal. Scaife displayed great initiative and personal courage in addition to most soldierly qualities in thus tackling single-handed and without hesitation a task which had been allotted to 3 AVREs under the command of an officer. He did so, moreover, knowing that his only offensive weapon was a petard only recently issued and fitted to the AVRE, whose potentialities he did not know, since he had no previous opportunity to fire one. Scaife had taken out a gun emplacement from 50 yards and a machine gun nest. Over at Sword Beach, a Sergeant Smythe was first down the ramp and at once made straight for a 75mm gun that was firing from the right flank. He disposed of it in a fashion that an earlier generation of cavalrymen would have appreciated, by running over it at a gallop. That done, the two flails went comfortably about their business and quickly cleared their lane, in spite of the disablement of one flail, which blew a track on a mine. Acts of bravery were to be repeated throughout the day. The only black spot was to be the American DD tanks on Omaha Beach. For clarification, the DDs, though trained by Hobart's 79th, were not part of the division. At Omaha, a unit of 29 DDs had been launched. Only 2 reached the beach. Launched 3 miles from the beach in rough seas, the landing craft were drifting away from the target beach, which forced the tanks to set a course, putting them side-on to high waves, thus increasing the amount of water splashing over and crumpling their canvas skirts. They floundered and sank. For all that, the DDs were considered a success. In the entire D-Day operation, 290 DD tanks were used. Out of those, 120 were launched at sea, for which at least 42 sank. Approximately 140 DD tanks were launched in very shallow water or directly on the shore. The American DD tanks suffered a 38% loss due to sinking, versus the British and Canadian, which lost around 31% due to sinking. The difference was that the American losses were all concentrated in one battalion. The support they gave to the troops on the beaches was invaluable. They would be used again during the invasion of southern France, the crossing of the Rhine in Germany, the crossing of the West Scheldt in the Netherlands, and the crossing of the Elbe in central Germany and in Italy. D-Day was not the end of the 79th, it would go on throughout the rest of the war. By the armistice, the 79th had almost 7,000 vehicles. Distributed throughout the army in northwest Europe, they were deployed as short-term assets when the need arose. They returned once the operation was completed. Development of the vehicles did not stop the Kangaroo, which was introduced after D-Day. The Canadians, concerned about losses, needed a way to supplement the numbers of armoured half-tracks available. The US-made M7 Priest self-propelled guns were being withdrawn, replaced with 25-pounders. The armament was stripped and a new front plate welded on. It could now be used as an armoured personnel carrier for up to 12 men. They would be operated by the 1st Canadian Armoured Personnel Carrier Squadron and the 49th Armoured Personnel Carrier Regiment as part of the 79th British Armoured Division. Almost as soon as the war in Europe ended, much of the 79th Armoured started to be disbanded, with units earmarked to be sent to Asia to carry on the fight against Japan. The dropping of the atomic bombs put paid to those deployments. The unit was officially disbanded in late August 1945. Aged 60 in 1945, Hobart was officially the oldest Major General in the British Army, and in 1946 he retired. Hobart had battled what he saw as the old-school military establishment for years. It's true he was probably difficult, which didn't win him many friends. Though a champion of armoured warfare, he is not to be remembered for his military thinking on tank warfare. What he should be remembered for is his ability to train men and create exceptional units, as Basil Liddell Hart said of him. To have moulded the best 2 British armoured divisions of the war was an outstanding achievement, but Hobart made it a hat-trick by his subsequent training of the Specialised 79th Armoured Division, the decisive factor on D-Day. It is debatable how decisive the 79th Division was on the day, but certainly General Eisenhower in his report thought highly of the Hobarts' Funnies. Apart from the factor of tactical surprise, the comparatively light casualties which were sustained on all beaches except Omaha were in large measure due to the success of the novel mechanical contrivances which we employed, and to the staggering morale and material effect of the mass of armour landed in the leading waves of the assault. It is doubtful if the assault forces could have firmly established themselves without the assistance of these weapons. Well, that's it, folks, for another season. It's been great to have you along as always, and we will be back in a few weeks with season 18. In the meanwhile, if that feels just a little too long to wait, then why not pop along to the store at the website thehistorynetwork.org and get yourself a previous season. Each of our previous seasons is packaged up as a chaptered file of all 10 episodes from that season and is conveniently there as a download. It's just a couple of pounds for each season, and they each last somewhere in the region of 3 to 5 hours, so plenty of listening for you there. Perhaps you might like to write a script on a topic we've not covered. Why not drop us a line? Some of our most popular episodes have been written by listeners. You can, of course, drop us a line about anything, info@thehistorynetwork.org, so do get in touch if you've got ideas for podcasts, would like to write a script for us, or want to bring us up on an error or point of view. Whatever it is, we love to hear from you. Thanks once again for listening. You've been listening to The History Network, written by Angus Wallace, read by Nick Barker.